Hi, everyone. Welcome to live stream with me, Dr. Aparajita Jidagunta. For those of you who are just joining in, whether you are coming in live or whether you're watching this later as a video, welcome to this live stream. I do these live streams every Monday and Thursday evenings at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And who am I to do these? I am a trained social and personality psychologist. I am a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategist and consultant, and I am a leadership coach for ambitious working women who want to transform themselves into visible leaders who are respected and recognized. And everything on the show, everything on these live streams are just my opinions. And I talk about sort of my thoughts on what I see happening in the world around us. So my opinions are my own and they don't reflect anybody else's. And that's how it's meant to be. So that being said, what I want to talk about today is something that happened on Friday, a news article that came to me on Friday as I was in a meeting, and just the interesting response I've seen as a result of this incident and this news report, and how that juxtaposes with the Black Lives Matter movement and the greater movement for equity and belongingness. If you are joining in, please let me know who you are in comments and we can have a conversation. But so today, what I want to talk about is the idea of equity not being a zero-sum game. And I really want to highlight this by using a case study that's come up. And before I get into this news report that I read on Friday, what I do want to say is by no means am I trying to compare the trauma involved in this incident or any other incident that I'm going to be talking about today. This case study is not about a comparison of the trauma or the tragedy or the loss or the devastation in any means of the word in terms of what the people involved experienced. However, this is a comment on the systemic aspect of inequities. I will say that. So again, not a comparison, just a comment on the systemic aspect of inequities as I see it from where I'm standing and my thoughts and my worldviews right now. So the case I want to bring up is a news report that I saw on Friday about an Indian restaurant, I believe somewhere in Missouri, being vandalized. And the name of the restaurant is India Palace. And it was an Indian restaurant that got vandalized, and there were phallic symbols, male genitalia, slurs, racial slurs, devastation, absolute devastation of property for the owners of the Indian restaurant. I know it must have been such a huge hit for a small business owner. And I say that as a small business owner. And my heart broke when I read how a small business owner, especially somebody from my community who has worked so hard to establish a reputable place of service over the course of so many years, gets vandalized because of racial discrimination. It was absolutely devastating. The interesting part for me in all of that was, and again, I'm not meaning this as a comparison, because I'm very glad that GoFundMes were set up for this restaurant immediately, and they are continuing to thrive, and that the owners of this restaurant are getting the help that they need to recover as a small business owner. So I am so glad that people are stepping up within our community and outside of our Indian American community to help the small business owner reestablish their business and reestablish their livelihood. I think there is so much to hope in that, about humanity coming together to help each other. So on the individual level, it's beautiful. On the systemic level, there were so many concerns that this news report brought up for me because I, again, read this report as soon as I came out of a meeting for an organization that I'm a part of that caters to and by Asian American professionals. So I was in an Asian American professionals meeting. I came out and I saw this report about an Indian restaurant being vandalized. And what I saw in the report was that the FBI was immediately classifying it as a hate crime, and that law enforcement officials were immediately on point and on the scene, gathering evidence and doing everything they can to find the perpetrators involved in this act of vandalism and in this act of property loss. And I am so thankful and grateful that these owners have the support that they need, even from law enforcement. My question is, why is that same courtesy not being extended to Black families when their own family members' lives, physical lives, are being taken away, when people are being murdered in the Black communities, when Breonna Taylor's murderers got fired, but they still haven't gotten indicted or charged, when it took nearly 2 months for Ahmaud Arbery's murderers to be arrested. Why is it taking law enforcement officials so long to respond to real cases where lives have been lost? But the news report talks, about an Indian restaurant getting vandalized, talks about how the FBI is slating it as a hate crime in, as quickly as possible, and everybody was on the scene. How is that equitable? When you look at equity in the course of the larger society, on the one hand, we have people getting murdered and disproportionately losing their lives because of their skin color. And law enforcement officials are, sure, doing what they feel like they have to after an immense amount of social pressure. But as hard as it is that a fellow Indian American business owner's property was lost, the fact that the FBI is on that case, and that case has gotten more attention from law enforcement officials than the murders of Black Americans, there is a very profound statement to be made about the systemic nature of inequities in our society. Because in an equitable society, the loss of life would have at least gotten equal attention, and actually should have gotten more attention than the loss of property. And with these cases being pitted against each other, what is actually happening here are two people of color communities being pitted against each other. And there is a very distinct possibility of the model minority myth coming to bite Indian American communities and society and our voices in the larger cause for equity, belongingness, and inclusion because of this model minority myth, because of our white adjacency, where we have gotten attention from law enforcement quicker when those who have murdered Black Americans are still roaming free without any charges. That is not equity. That is not meeting people where they need to be met. And again, when I'm putting these two examples against each other, my intent and impact that I want to have is not to minimize the case of the Indian American business owner at all. They absolutely deserve the help. But why are we not giving the same amount of help, if not more, to the families of those who have unjustly lost their lives because of police brutality and murder? What is stopping us from lifting our voices in support of those cases? And as South Asians, how are we being systemically pitted against our fellow people of color communities because of this inequitable treatment? And yes, this inequitable treatment is in our benefit. So it does protect our interests to take this. But what is the cost we are paying by doing that in terms of our participation in the greater dialogue for equity and belongingness? And by no means am I saying that the owner of that Indian American restaurant should deny any help. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. They should accept whatever help they can. But for the rest of us who are helping the Indian American restaurant, but are not speaking up about the murders of Black Americans, what is really stopping us from realizing that the loss of life and the inequities around loss of life, around murders right now, also need us to step up and speak up? What is stopping us from undergoing the learning that we need to learn, from undergoing the unlearning that needs to happen, and from undergoing the transformation that we need to go through to dismantle our own internal prejudices, so that when these kind of situations happen, regardless of the communities that they're happening in, what we are focused on is the unjustness of them, and we are adding our power and our voices even to those situations. Because at the end of the day, equity and belongingness are not zero-sum games. Equity is not a zero-sum game. Giving people access to the resources they need, giving people access to the help they need, giving people access to the support they need is not a zero-sum game. Because the more of us in society that thrive, the more we can all thrive as individuals and a society. That's the bottom line. But by buying into these systemic issues and by buying into the inequities and by staying silent about other people's oppressions because we are somehow being privileged that's what actually makes equity a zero-sum game when it's not. It's a false facade. It's an illusion. We can use our privilege because of our adjacency to these power structures to actually lend our voices to Black Lives Matter, to speaking out against the disproportionate injustices happening in Black communities, to Black community members, to speak up against the lawyers who defended who were pointing guns at protesters. And I'm not getting into the right or wrong of that. I'm more talking about how can we use our privilege to help ourselves and to speak up for other communities. And that's what I mean by highlighting this case with the Indian American restaurant and juxtaposing it against the Black Lives Matter movement. Absolutely, the Indian American restaurant owner deserves the support and help that they can get. But absolutely, the fact that the FBI is there talking about hate crimes pretty much soon after this restaurant gets vandalized. But again, to reiterate, Breonna Taylor's murderers have still not been arrested or indicted. The FBI is working on a property loss case, whereas people who have murdered unjustly and brutally, when there was no need for lethal force, are still free. When you juxtapose these situations, you understand that things are not equitable. But again, equity is not a zero-sum game. Equity is about giving people what they need, because every single person we help make thrive, like every single person that thrives helps society thrive. For us to get to sustainable, implementable conversations about the solutions for intentional inclusion, for equity, for belongingness, for mental well-being, for a more stable society for ourselves and for our future generations, we have to dismantle our previous ideas of equity. We have to understand that equity is about giving people access to the resources that they need to thrive, and that the access to the resources is not equal. Equity is not equality. Equality tries to make things to that 100% box. Equity defies those boxes. Equity is about resources that are fair, access to support that's fair, that helps that person thrive. So in the case of the Indian American restaurant owner, they are getting access to resources that they need to rebuild and recover, hopefully. And as these GoFundMe campaigns happen, which I truly hope that they keep happening, because as a small business owner, again, my heart breaks for that owner of India Palace, because nobody deserves that. No small business owner deserves that, especially not a small business owner who is a member of my own community. But at the same time, I have to wonder, when law enforcement's response to that situation was so rapid and so clear and so transparent and so supportive, why are Black lives asking for justice not getting the same treatment when it has to do with the loss of human life and not property? What needs to change? How do our perspectives need to shift? What do we need to unlearn and rethink for us to make sense of the equity in that situation? I invite and encourage all of us to think of it. I know I am thinking of it ever since this happened on Friday. I can't get this out of my mind, which is why, even though I almost canceled live stream today because my head is hurting so badly and I'm so tired, I just really felt it was important to get this point out of, it's not just about diversity. If you want to be intentionally inclusive, start thinking about equity and belongingness, and get rid of the ideas that they are zero-sum games, because those are outdated scripts. And of course, as a small business owner myself, I am doing something about that, and I will be announcing that soon, probably over the next week or so. So please stay tuned for that. But that's it for me for today. Again, if you're joining in later on this video, please comment, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please feel free to reach out to me. I will be putting up, there you go. There is that's all of my contact information. Whether you joined in on this live or whether you're joining in later, I am a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategist and consultant. And my whole determination, purpose, and point with all of my work is to make the invisible visible for better belongingness. And that first starts with you seeing all of yourself without judgment and with love, without criticism, with acceptance. Because only when that can happen can you include other people as whole people. So the journey to diversity, intentional inclusion, equity, and belongingness starts within you, by you unlearning unpacking and reframing everything you think you know about life so that you understand that it is only by all of us thriving that any one of us can thrive, and it is only by every single one of us thriving that all of us can thrive. And that's exactly what makes equity and inclusion not a zero-sum game on its own or together. I'll be back on Thursday with another live stream. I hope this was helpful. And again, I encourage you to think about the questions I asked and don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. I'll see you on Thursday.